It's time for an inside look at what's cooking on the San Diego Padres hot stove as the team gets ready for the 2025 season.
Swing and a miss. Padres win.
Sam Levitt breaks down the Padres offseason moves and provides an in-depth look at everything you need to know before the Padres take the field for spring training.
Swinging a high fly ball. Deep left center. This one way back and gone.
Plus the latest headlines from around Major League Baseball and analysis of what's happening around the big leagues.
Breaking news out of baseball.
Welcome to Inside San Diego Baseball with the Padres Radio Network's pre- and post-game host, Sam Levitt.
And we're coming to you live on a Wednesday night here in America's finest city. It is Inside San Diego Baseball, our third episode. Wednesday night, 7 to 9 p.m. Sam Levitt with you here inside our San Diego studios. Welcome in. Hope you're having a great Wednesday. Hope you're having a great week. Yes, I am back in San Diego after my journey to the East Coast last week. No longer in our remote East Coast 97.3 The Fan studios. I am back in our Odyssey Palace studios, as the great Chris Ello likes to say, and we have the next 2 hours to spend together and talk all things Padres baseball as the offseason rolls along here on November 20th. Next week is Thanksgiving. Then a couple of weeks after that, we have the winter meetings. And things really start to heat up and get going if they haven't heated up already. Who knows? Maybe Juan Soto will have a team by then. By the time we get to the winter meetings in Dallas, I will be there, but we will talk about all things Padres baseball. A lot to get to. I'll set that up in just a moment. We've got Frank Marchese with me producing tonight. He'll chime in from time to time. Frank, how are you? Good to see you once again.
Doing good. Well, nice to have you back. I told you last week, yes, I'm fine. I'm excited to have Sam in the studio all the time. Immediately goes to New York. Immediately, it's like a Padre home game again, but you're back, which is very, very nice.
Well, it's good to be back. I got back last night, took a flight around 4 p.m. East Coast time, so I got in just a little after 7:30 or so yesterday, and it was pretty funny. I called the Uber. I'm waiting at the airport, take me back to beautiful Pacific Beach. And I had an Uber driver, great guy by the name of Randy. And immediately Randy steps outside and he's helping me get my suitcases into the trunk. And Randy goes, Sam Levitt? Big 97.3 The Fan listener, listens all day long. Big fan of Matt Scraby. The Scraby Show listens all day long. And Randy and I had a great conversation. So Randy said he would be tuned in right now. So Randy, if you're listening, thank you for the safe ride home. Great to talk to you yesterday and appreciate you tuning in. So that was a nice little treat. And then woke up this morning and was in beautiful San Diego. I'll tell you, I've spent 2.5 years now in this great city. And there is something to waking up in San Diego, getting a cup of coffee, getting things set up, getting back into a little routine after about a week and a half away. There's something about this place. It just feels good. So, Frank, very, very good to be back, and good to be back with you. You did a nice job with Scraby. We're going to touch on here in the opening segment a couple of things that you two talked about, but everything going well with you. You look great. We continue to keep an eye on you. You look great. Everything's going well there.
Yep, 60 pounds in 6 weeks.
Wow.
So, yep.
60
down to
pounds.
334.
Oh, my goodness. Good for you, man. Well, you look good.
Thank you.
You can tell you look good. You continue to bust out new shirts. So
No, this was in the old rotation that still fit. This one fits a lot better now. I haven't fit in this shirt this way in a while.
Let's preview what we'll get to here throughout the next 2 hours. And we will take your phone calls throughout the program, 833-288-0973. The phone number, as always, 833-288-0973. The phone number to call, take all your Padres calls, whatever you want to talk about. If you want to talk about free agency, trades, the award snubs, which I'll get to in just a second. But to touch on a couple of things we'll get to, we'll talk about the Padres' adjustments to their 40-man roster, really their additions to the 40-man roster, as the Padres protected a few minor league pitchers in advance of the Rule 5 draft that will happen at the winter meetings in Dallas in early December. And normally you don't make, I guess, a ton out of the Rule 5 protections, but I actually do think it says a little something about the way the Padres are thinking right now and what they value right now. So we'll get to that coming up a little bit later. We will get to the latest Major League headlines. We had some interesting comments today from Yankees owner Hal Steinbrenner on Juan Soto. We'll also get to the Hall of Fame ballot. We'll get to an interesting story about the Rays stadium situation, not just for 2025, but beyond that. Sort of a fascinating situation when you think about where the A's are in that whole process of potentially still moving to Las Vegas. They say they're moving to Las Vegas, but they have not broke ground on a new stadium.
I heard sorry, you were talking about the A's.
Well, that's the A's, and then Tampa Bay. It sounds like this is going to continue to be just a really interesting situation with their stadium.
I heard a rumor. I don't know how true it is, but I heard a rumor that Nashville might be a consideration for the Rays if they can't figure something out in Tampa.
I can believe that. Yeah, it's always sounded like Nashville, Portland could be places that Major League Baseball eventually expands to. And we'll touch on some other stories as well, some of the transactions that have gone on in the past week or so across Major League Baseball. But one thing we did last week, a week ago Wednesday night, was we previewed the awards, the Major League Baseball Writers Association awards that would start to get announced this week. And obviously that has happened. We had the Cy Young Award winners announced earlier today. Tarek Skubal winning in the American League, Chris Sale winning in the National League, and really no big surprise there with either of those guys winning those two awards. But here in San Diego, the notable thing is that the Padres essentially in the BBWA awards went 0 for 2, and really they went 0 for 3 on the 3 awards the Padres were up for, if you want to include Executive of the Year, which is not voted on by the BBWA, but is voted on by Major League Baseball executives. So to recap the 0 for 3, A.J. Preller doesn't win Executive of the Year. That went to Man Arnold of the Brewers. That was announced a couple of weeks ago at this point. Jackson Merrill, as you probably know by now, finishes second for NL Rookie of the Year. 7 first-place votes, 2 of those from San Diego Writers. And then Mike Shildt finishes second for NL Manager of the Year. Got 1 first-place vote, 1 from a San Diego writer. So, combined, Jackson Merrill and Mike Shildt got a combined 8 of 60 first-place votes, 3 of them from San Diego chapter writers of the Baseball Writers Association of America. So really, if you want to break it down this way, they got 5 of a possible 56 votes from non-San Diego chapter writers. And I do think it's significant to bring up that 5 of 56 because, remember, especially for Rookie of the Year, 2 of the 7 first-place votes for Jackson Merrill came from San Diego writers, which doesn't surprise me at all because those guys watch him every day, and they're here on the West Coast. So I thought the way we would attack this, we would rank the snubs from least egregious to most egregious out of these 3. Executive of the Year, Jackson Merrill not winning NL Rookie of the Year, and Mike Shildt not winning National League Manager of the Year. So let's start with the least egregious snub. In my mind, and Frank, feel free to chime in as we go here, the least egregious snub is actually Jackson Merrill not winning NL Rookie of the Year. Now, this is no reflection, but let me continue here, Frank. I got a big sigh from Frank, but hear me out. This is no reflection on Jackson Merrill and his season, okay? Jackson Merrill was amazing, played every day, 156 games, was on the opening day roster, asked to play a new position he never played, was a clutch machine, played on a 93-win team that made the playoffs. There's a chance that the Padres, they probably don't make the playoffs without Jackson Merrill. There's no doubt. I want to be very, very clear here that to me, and we said it last week, Jackson Merrill would have been our pick for NL Rookie of the Year and should have won NL Rookie of the Year. Remember, I'm saying most egregious based on the entire picture of what actually transpired. You look at even Fangraphs WAR. Merrill had 5.3, Skeens had 4.3. Baseball Reference WAR, it's calculated a little bit differently. Skeens beats out Merrill. They are different formulas for calculating wins. Look, The argument for Paul Skeens is that from the moment he debuted on May 11th, he was arguably the best pitcher in baseball. 1.96 ERA in 23 starts, 170 strikeouts, and 133 innings. The ERA was even a quarter of a point lower than Chris Sales in that span, who won the NL Cy Young earlier tonight. We said it last week, Frank. Even though we would have picked Merrill, we wanted Merrill to win. We were not going to be surprised if and when Paul Skeens won this award. And we asked ourselves, we asked of the BBWA, the 30 voters that made this pick, would they be able to get past the narrative part of this? Would they be able to get past the hype train of Paul Skeens that really existed all year, that seemed to, as the season went along, start to flip the other way, start to flip the way of Jackson Merrill as he started to have those moments, as it started to at least seem that on a national level that more and more people thought he was going to be Rookie of the Year. We're calling him the Rookie of the Year. And the answer to that question was that the writers couldn't get past it. And to me, whether you want to call it East Coast bias or just bias in general, the fact that Paul Skeens was the media darling all year, they could not get past that. To me, Jackson Merrill was the more impactful player for a team that made the postseason. But the reason, again, I call it least egregious, even though you and I both think that Jackson Merrill should have been Rookie of the Year, is the fact that Paul Skeens, in his own right, obviously was very deserving of the award by the way he won it. So unfortunately, the reality is this. Jackson Merrill had an amazing rookie season. Paul Skeens had an amazing rookie season. Even in a normal year, Jackson Chorio would have been the runaway favorite in a lot of other years, who finished third. The problem is that Skeens and Merrill just happened to debut in the same year, and that's unfortunate for Jackson Merrill. The part of this that is egregious to me, that's most egregious, even though I'm ranking it last, is the fact that this wasn't closer. I'm shocked that it wasn't closer. I don't understand how Jackson only gets 7 first-place votes, how it's that lopsided. It makes me feel like a lot of these writers were asleep when Jackson was playing. A lot of these writers just took the Skeens narrative, the fact that he was the number 1 pick, the fact that he started the All-Star game. By the way, also including that he was incredible this season for a rookie pitcher. But they did not actually watch, factor in, understand what Jackson Merrill meant to the San Diego Padres. With all that said, even though we'll think for forever now that it should have been Jackson, the reason I rank it last, again, is that he lost to a guy in Paul Skeens that by the numbers was also amazing and deserving of the award in his own right. So yes, totally ridiculous that it wasn't closer. I'm shocked it wasn't closer. I don't understand why it wasn't closer. I thought it would be a very close vote, down to the wire type of thing. It was not. 23 first place votes for Skeens, 7 for Jackson. To me, that's ridiculous. But again, the reason I say it's least egregious out of these 3, and we'll get to the other 2, I know I went long here with the first one, is the fact that Paul Skeens was obviously very deserving as well.
No, he was definitely deserving. But as you had said, you said 2 non-San Diego writers, right? Yes or no?
Yes, 2. I'm sorry. Out of the 7 Merrill first place votes, 2 San Diego writers. So 5 non-San Diego.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you are not paying attention, you are a baseball writer. Your job description, quite literally, is to pay attention to the entirety of the sport. I'm not telling you have to stay up and watch every single game until 2 o'clock in the morning Eastern. But watch the highlights. Look at box scores, the extended highlights. Watch those. You have to be paying attention to all of baseball, not just the baseball that is in your direct area and in your time zone periphery. There definitely is an East Coast bias. Without a doubt there is. This is coming from 2 people that lived on the East Coast. There is an East Coast bias.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But that doesn't excuse the fact, and especially if you are a writer that cannot get past the narrative that Major League Baseball is putting out to give a guy who had been there all year, played all but 6 games, and made the impact that Jackson Merrill made this year. If you can't get past the narrative that baseball's putting out, you shouldn't have a vote.
Yeah, I'm just shocked it wasn't closer, and it makes me feel, and again, and I heard Jesse Agler on Gwynn and Chris talk about this a little bit earlier, you know, growing up on the East Coast, I don't know that I necessarily believe there was something called East Coast bias, but something like this makes me believe
It's
that, because I
obvious.
cannot imagine, unless you're just rolling with the narrative, unless you're just rolling with the fact that he started the All-Star game, unless you're just rolling with the fact that he was the darling of this whole thing really all year, until sort of late in the summer, it seemed like maybe that tide was turning towards Merrill. I don't understand how this was this much of a landslide as far as the first place votes. It makes me feel like people just weren't watching, didn't care to actually understand, look into what Merrill meant to the Padres, the impact he had. And look, and then there's the other part of it, of a position player versus a pitcher, and the impact that a position player has every day versus a pitcher who wasn't even there for the first month and a half. Yeah. The impact that Jackson had on a 90-plus win team versus a last-place team with Paul Skeens. Now, is there an argument to say, hey, should somebody like Skeens get penalized for being on a bad team? You can make the argument they shouldn't be penalized for that, especially a pitcher, right? Not his fault. But there is certainly something to be said that Jackson was on a team that needed him, that quite simply, if he's not there, I don't know if they make the postseason. They probably don't. That's how impactful he was. And again, I'm not, at the end of the day, I will come away from this vote not being angry that Skeens won, because Skeens in his own right obviously was also very deserving. But I will be angry at the fact that it just seems like, based on the votes, that Jackson didn't get a real fair shake. Oh. And that is the part, if you're a Padres fan, that I think will hurt. Will Jackson really care about it? No, I don't think so. We asked him a million times. Reporters asked him a million times during the season as the summer went on about Rookie of the Year, about what it would mean to him, about if he was paying attention to all the talk around him. He continued to say no. I don't think he's impacted by it. I don't think he really cares. And I'll say this, and then we'll go to break and we'll continue my egregious list, because we obviously focused on one here. Classic Sam. Just taking forever. It's okay. We got 2 hours here.
Imagine if this was the last segment of postgame.
Exactly.
We would never get out of here.
No. But with Jackson Merrill, here's what I'll say. Here's what I guess is the silver lining for him out of this whole thing. Number one, I don't think he really cares. I'm sure by the time the season ended, I'm sure he wanted to win it. He's competitive, and he had a great year. He deserved it, just like Skeens deserved it, okay? And just in like another year, if it were next year, and Jackson Chourio had the same season, he'd probably win it, because he wouldn't be with Merrill and Skeens. It was a weird year with 3 really, really impressive rookies. Merrill and Skeens, I think, on a bit of a different level than Chourio. But what I like is this, and I don't think Jackson would admit this, and if we ask him about it during spring training next year, I don't think he'd ever admit it. But he's the type of guy, he's so competitive, he's so passionate, he's such a hard worker. It's somewhere in there. There will be a chip somewhere. I don't think he'd ever say it. But if you think that somewhere deep inside his psyche, okay, and we know he's competitive, and he loves playing the game, and he wants to win, and he loves being a Padre, I'd be willing to bet, and I want to ask him, I'm not going to ask Jackson first day of spring training, because I know the answer I'm going to get. But I think somewhere it'll be in there of, hey, 7 first place votes for Rookie of the Year? You didn't even think it was close? You didn't, all you writers, you didn't think it was close? It'll be somewhere in there. And maybe that gives him just a little more edge than he already had, a little more motivation than he already had to be the type of player I all think we believe he's ultimately going to be, and that's a superstar in this league. So I don't think he'll ever say it, but that's the silver lining. I think somewhere in there, the greats always have it, right? They look for little things to give them an edge, to keep them going. Somewhere in there, I think it'll be there for Jackson moving forward.
If I were Jackson Merrill, there would be two things I'm practicing this offseason. Number one is how to answer that question for the first 2 weeks of spring training, because you know it's coming and you know it's coming from everybody. And number two, I would get on that special pitching machine and I would look at every single pitch that Paul Skeens has. So I am ready when Pittsburgh comes here or when you go out there to beat him.
Well, they missed each other this season, which was always disappointing.
Intentionally, I think, from what I heard.
I don't remember. I think they just didn't line up because they played the two series pretty close together.
I think it was the first time Pittsburgh manipulated the rotation to where they
maybe I don't remember, but yeah, it will be interesting. I assume they're going to face each other at some point. It may not even be this year, depending on how their rotation works out. Anyway, all right, well, step aside. When we come back, I didn't expect that we were going to do the Merrill Skeens thing for the entire first segment, but whatever, here we are. We'll talk about the other snubs. We'll talk about Manager of the Year, and then we'll talk about what I think is actually, out of all these, I think the most egregious snub, and that is Executive of the Year. We'll talk about that when we come back. We will take your phone calls here, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. We're just getting started on a Wednesday night. Here on Inside San Diego Baseball, we are taking you up until 9 p.m. here on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. 725 here on 97.3 The Fan. Sam Levitt with you. It's Inside San Diego Baseball on a Wednesday night. We are taking you up until 9 p.m., your once-a-week show for all things Padres baseball. As we continue on, we are talking about the Padres award snubs. We did the first segment on Jackson Merrill not winning NL Rookie of the Year, losing to Paul Skeens. And again, and look, you don't have to agree with me. I get that. But we've been ranking the 3 award snubs, and that's Rookie of the Year, Manager of the Year, and Executive of the Year, in my mind, from least egregious to most egregious. And again, and I get it, I think everybody in this city thought and believed that Jackson Merrill should be Rookie of the Year, as do I, as does Frank here in the studio. But again, just to wrap it up, that part of the conversation quickly, the reason I list it least egregious is not because I don't believe Jackson should have been Rookie of the Year. He absolutely should have won the award in my mind. But he lost it to a guy in Skeens who, while we can think and believe forever that the writers got, basically couldn't look past the Skeens hype train, couldn't look past the narrative of Paul Skeens and everything he was, the reality is this. Paul Skeens, much like Jackson Merrill, was extremely, just from a pure baseball standpoint, deserving of the award. Both these guys are really deserving of the award, and I don't think there's any shame at the end of the day in the fact that Merrill did not win the award because he happened to debut in the same year that Paul Skeens debuted. That's just the reality of it, so that's why I call it least egregious, because there was a guy waiting there in Skeens who also was extremely deserving, let's be honest about it, of winning National League Rookie of the Year. So it brings us to what I think is actually the second most egregious snub. And that is NL Manager of the Year. Mike Shildt getting 1 first-place vote. Pat Murphy getting all but 1 first-place vote, according to the Baseball Writers Association of America. So what did Mike Shildt do? He took an extremely disappointing team from 2023. He won 93 games with it, a team that shed nearly $100 million in payroll, an 11-win improvement from 2023 to 2024. And we'll talk more about the way this team was constructed and the reduction in payroll in a moment when we talk about Executive of the Year. But the reason that this one confuses me, Pat Murphy got 27 first-place votes. I'm sorry about that. But the reason that this one really confuses me and sort of irks me is I cannot figure out why this was such a runaway for Pat Murphy. I don't get it. The Brewers won 92 games in 2023 under Craig Counsell with a fairly similar team. They did trade Corbin Burns before this past season. They did miss Devin Williams for a few months. They did have new faces in their starting rotation. He did take over, I guess, sort of a tumultuous situation with Craig Counsell suddenly going to Chicago. But I don't understand, A, why this wasn't much closer, considering what Mike Shildt did. And number 2, to be totally honest with you, why wasn't Carlos Mendoza more of a serious candidate? The reason I listed this number 2, to this point, even though the Brewers, by a lot of people, weren't picked to do much, and a lot of people picked the Cubs to win that division, the Brewers played and ultimately was not a very good division. They won 1 more game this year than they won last year. I just don't understand why this was such a runaway for Pat Murphy. To me, there was a real serious case for Mike Shildt. The run the Padres went on, turning around what was a very disappointing team in 2023. And then the Mendoza part of it, I'm confused by as well. Why wasn't Carlos Mendoza more of a serious candidate, got more first-place votes? The Mets were 11 games under 500. They also had, in a different way, a very disappointing 2023, sort of a mess of 2023. They end up going on this magical run to make the postseason. Everything that happened in the final week of the season, day of the season, I mean, that was an unbelievable turnaround. I don't understand why this was such a runaway vote for Pat Murphy. I'm almost more confused by it than I am with the Rookie of the Year, and that's why I listed it second. I don't get it. For both those guys, Schultz and Mendoza, why both those guys didn't receive way more first place votes, because I think there were very convincing cases for both.
The only thing I can think of, and it's the same reason why I think of Stephen Vogt as to why Stephen Vogt won on the other end, is because they were first place in their division all season long, didn't really have a fight. I mean, after the calendar flipped to May, the Cubs fell off, and no one challenged the Brewers again the rest of the year. So that's the only reason that I could think, completely ignoring the fact that the Brewers were, as you said, in a very bad division, were the worst of the three divisional winners, had less wins than San Diego on the year. Am I right?
The same amount of wins. They both had 93.
Okay, so that's not.
Yeah,
that shouldn't. The fact that you stayed in first all season long should not be the overriding factor.
Right. To me, now I get. Look, I'm not saying Pat Murphy didn't deserve it. Okay, look, he took a team that was not expected to do a whole lot, and they won 93 games, and they led wire to wire. I get it. I get the argument. But to your point about the American League, again, to me, the AL Manager of the Year was A.J. Hinch.
Yes.
How do you not consider? I understand the record wasn't what the Guardians was. I understand their season in totality wasn't what the Guardians was. But you look at the job he did, that team coming out of nowhere, the way they rallied together, the way they seemingly rallied around their manager. To me, Manager of the Year is something that you can't just base in a win total, even in preseason projections, because it's about more than that. It's about a manager. It's not about numbers on the field. It's not about how many home runs you hit, how many RBI you collected. It's about sort of the job you did with your particular team in your particular situation, how you managed your club, the personalities, how you brought them together. That's what a great manager is, right? That's probably the most important part of being a manager. So I'm with you. I would have voted for A.J. Hinch. And again, in the National League, I'm just unclear why it was such a runaway. I'm not saying Pat Murphy didn't deserve it. I'm not saying that. But I'm shocked, again, much like we were with Rookie of the Year. I'm shocked that it wasn't closer, and I'm shocked that Carlos Mendoza wasn't more of a serious candidate. I am.
It just felt like it feels like the writers just sleptwalked through all of these this year, because other than they got the Cy Young right. They got both Cy Young Award
those
winners
were
right.
Easy, yeah.
But after that, it's like, what are you doing? It's like every race was a runaway, and the races that were the most egregious runaways were wrong. It's like the wrong winner.
Yeah, I just, again, with both those, I don't understand why they were runaways. I thought there were really, really strong arguments for obviously Merrill and obviously Schultz. Okay, that brings us, though, to what I think is actually the most egregious one. And this is a little bit different because A.J. Preller not winning Executive of the Year, losing it to the Brewers general manager, Matt Arnold. Now, this is voted on by executives from all 30 teams before the start of the postseason. So this is a little bit different. This is not writers. This is executives voting on it. Without even getting into the Matt Arnold part of it, I thought this was an easy choice. If you just want to look at who did the best job at quote-unquote GMing this season, you consider A.J. Preller had to cut payroll by almost $100 million. He had to trade Juan Soto. Okay?
Yes.
It wasn't a choice. They needed to get the payroll down. There was no way they were going to do that without trading Soto. It was a must. So it's not like somebody could look at the situation and say, oh, well, why would you trade Juan Soto, who's now going to sign for $650 million? Everybody knows he had to trade Juan Soto. He loses Seth Lugo. He loses Michael Wacha. He loses Blake Snell. He loses Josh Hader. They win 93 games. Despite that, all the amazing things he hit on, Jackson Merrill getting called up, he was right. David Peralta, Donovan Solano, those are smaller moves that ended up being really, really important. The Michael King acquisition being part of the Soto trade. Michael King could be a Cy Young candidate next year. That's how good he proved to be. Trading for Araj, trading for Cease. Yeah, he gave up a lot, but meanwhile, he went and got him. He made moves to make his team better. The trade for Adam, the trade for Scott at the deadline, picking up Jeremiah Estrada, a team that missed Yu Darvish and Joe Musgrove for significant periods of time. And that team won 93 games, despite, again, cutting payroll by $100 million and losing during the offseason. Soto, Lugo, who was a Cy Young caliber pitcher this year, Waka, Snell, Hader. Who did a better job as far as making the little moves, calling up guys at the right time, making impactful trades, being aggressive, truly reassembling a team that could have the second best record in the history of that respective franchise? To me, it was very clearly A.J. Preller, the job he did to get this roster to a place where it could win 93 games. And even though they didn't do it, I think most people would agree was a World Series caliber roster. They didn't win the series they needed to. They didn't score for 24 consecutive innings. We all understand that. But the roster, was it good enough to go compete in the NLCS and in a World Series? I will believe forever that it was. They didn't win the games they had to get there. But to me, I thought AJ, this was his finest work, and I thought it was about as great of a job as anybody did all year. And to me, it's pretty clear cut. I don't know, honestly, how it was an AJ Preller.
The only thing I will say, and you're right on everything you say, and you know from being here doing games with me that I have been very critical of A.J. Preller over the last couple of years, especially when it comes to trading prospects. He did a fantastic job this season. He made a lot of the right moves at the right time when he needed to, just as you said. The only rebut I have to that is, other than getting Jason Adam, other than getting Tanner Scott, he made all of those moves before the All-Star break.
Yes.
And they were a game over 500.
Yeah, but it's the totality of the season.
No, I understand that. But the roster was in place before the All-Star break. They were 5 games over 500 and lost the last 4 going into the break. So the same team that was 500 turned it around. I think that's more on the manager than it is on A.J. Preller, because Preller's start was 500. Schilt's turnaround of that team brought them to where they were. You're 100% right on everything you say, but that would be my rebut, is that the roster was basically set before the All-Star break, again, other than Adam and Scott, and the team was 500.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you want, let's compare it to the Mets for a second, right? They had a brutal start to the year. I'm just talking about if you look at a job any GM does to build the team, right?
Yeah.
So David Stearns with the Mets, let's say. They were 11 games under 500. It's not going well. Now, obviously, early on, it didn't really look like they were a team built to really compete in 2024.
0-5.
But if you're just judging David Stearns on, okay, what's the roster you constructed for this year to give your team, whatever situation you're in, the best chance to win this year? At one point of the season, you would say, well, he's not doing a very good job. But the team turns it around. They make Game 6 of the NLCS and ultimately did a really, really good job. So it's a totality of
But a lot of players that he got, Jesse Winker, a lot of the role players that he ended up getting were after the break, and that's when the turnaround really started.
Yeah. But Scott and Adam had
I gave you that. Yeah. That's fine. They definitely did. They definitely had an impact on the team. But the majority of the team, 95% of the team, was set, and it was 500. That's my only rebut to that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's why they play 162 games. Anyway, so that's about it. All I have to say on the various awards, Rookie of the Year, Manager of the Year, Executive of the Year, by the way, was chosen a while ago. We didn't really touch on it. But while we were talking about awards, it's a good time to talk about it. Look, at the end of the day, does any of this really, really, really matter? Probably not. Although the one that really does matter is the Rookie of the Year, because had Jackson won it, Padres would have got a draft pick. So that one does really matter. It robs the Padres of a draft pick. It also gave Paul Skeens a full year of service, which is pretty significant considering the Pirates didn't bring him up until mid-May because they manipulated his service time and didn't want to give him a full year of service. Well, Paul Skeens gets the last laugh and gets the full year of service anyway because he was so good. So the Rookie of the Year voting does really impact the baseball side of things. I mean, who knows who the Padres could have selected with that extra first-round pick? We'll never know. But at the end of the day, like we said in the opening segment, you hope that in the case of somebody like Jackson Merrill, it somewhere, and he probably won't admit this at any point, but somewhere creates a little chip on the shoulder for him to work even harder than I'm sure he's working already this offseason to come back and be even better in his sophomore campaign in 2025. Again, he probably won't admit that at any point. He'll probably shrug it off, and we heard that all year from Jackson, but you hope that somewhere inside him, maybe it gives him even a little bit more motivation to go out there next year and in the years to come and say, hey, to those 23 writers that didn't select him in first place for NL Rookie of the Year in 2024, hey, remember when you thought I wasn't the Rookie of the Year? Well, watch this, and we'll see. See what happens in 2025 with Merrill and everybody else. All right, when we come back, we'll continue to discuss some various Padres-related topics and Major League Baseball-related topics. We'll get into Juan Soto when we come back. We'll talk about the latest headlines on the Juan Soto sweepstakes. A little bit later, we'll talk about the Padres, who they protected from the Rule 5 draft, who they added to the 40-man roster, what that can tell us about the Padres moving forward and what they may be valuing depth-wise right now heading into 2025. We'll get into some other items as well. You can call in 833-288-0973. Again, the phone number 833-288-0973. You're listening to Inside San Diego Baseball on a Wednesday night. We're back with more after this on 97.3 The Fan. Inside San Diego baseball continues on this Wednesday night, 7:46 on 97.3 The Fan. We are taking you up until 9 p.m. as we wrap up this Wednesday. Plenty of Padres talk. Sam Levitt with you inside our San Diego studios as we continue to discuss all things San Diego Padres. Appreciate you joining us on this Wednesday evening. If you want to call in, phone number is always 833-288-0973. Again, 833-288-0973 as always. And as usual with our pre and post game shows, if you want to get involved on social media, you can do that as well. You can tweet at me at Sammy Lev, SAMMYLEV. You can also find me on Instagram. DM me there. Sammy Lev there too, SAMMYLEV. If you have a comment or a concern, you want to express something about the Padres, I'll be sure to say your name, give you a little shout out, so you can comment on there as well. We also are on YouTube for all of these 2-hour programs on Wednesday nights. So the YouTube stream, go to 97.3 The Fan, and you can watch Frank and I live and right at you on the camera on YouTube. So feel free to tune in there as well, and you can also get involved in the comment section on YouTube. A comment section that is tamer than the post-game comment sections. The post-game comment sections, depending on the night, can get a little wild from time to time. But it seems like people in the off season, they're chilled out, which I understand. Reality is, and this is not an invitation to turn the dial right now. Reality is that we are still in a very quiet part of the off season where not a lot has happened, where we're talking about a lot of theoreticals. Now, we did have the awards, the Rookie of the Year and the Manager of the Year and Executive of the Year and the Cy Youngs, and we'll have the MVPs announced to wrap up the week from Major League Baseball. So we still have more to do with that. So we're getting a little bit into that, and then we get to the winter meetings. But let's be honest, there's not a ton of news going on right now, so we're kind of, quote-unquote, no pun intended, rounding the bases when it comes to all these different storylines. One part of the offseason, and obviously a very, very, very big part of the offseason, not necessarily for the Padres, but for a number of different teams, is the pursuit of Juan Soto. And that is the one part of the offseason, part of free agency right now, where we actually are hearing quite a bit about what's going on. We do know the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, the Mets, the Yankees, the Dodgers have all either met or are expected to meet with Juan Soto. We know the Phillies plan to meet with Juan Soto. So there are a variety of teams that are seemingly in the mix here. Now, earlier today, Yankees owner Hal Steinbrenner spoke with the media after Steinbrenner, along with the rest of the contingent from the Yankees, met with Juan Soto in California. And I'll tell you what, if I'm a Yankees fan, reading what Hal Steinbrenner had to say earlier today outside the owners' meetings in New York at the MLB offices, I'm not really confident that this is going in the direction I want it to go. Let's read some quotes here from Hal Steinbrenner. This was earlier today. Steinbrenner, and this is from an article, ESPN.com, Jorge Castillo wrote this, but this is all over the place from earlier today. Yankees owner Hal Steinbrenner confirming that club officials recently met with free agent slugger Juan Soto in California, describing it as a quote-unquote good meeting that included quote-unquote very honest back-and-forth dialogue. A quote from Hal, "Our fans really enjoyed having him in New York. He's definitely a significant part of why we got to the World Series. I've got ears. I know it's expected of me. So look, it's been a priority. We wouldn't have gone to the West Coast if it wasn't." A little bit later in the article, Steinbrenner said, quote, "No idea," when asked if he was confident the team would re-sign Soto. Quote, "We'll be in the mix. I'll leave it at that." Let me read a little bit more here. In addition to the Yankees, Soto has met with the Mets, Blue Jays, Red Sox, Dodgers over the past week. The Mets, buoyed by billionaire owner Steve Cohen's deep pockets, are widely considered as the Yankees' chief competition for Soto's services. Quote, "I could say that about a couple of other owners too. Steinbrenner said when asked about Cohen's spending power, quote, or corporations for that matter that represent the ownership group. So, I mean, of course, it's a concern. So that's most of what Hal Steinbrenner, Yankees owner, had to say when asked about Juan Soto. And I go back to this quote, and this is the one where if I'm a Yankees fan, I'm like, uh-oh. We'll be in the mix. I'll leave it at that. I don't know about you. That doesn't sound like somebody who is particularly confident that either Soto will continue to be a Yankee, and in relation to that, that he's not going to be outbid. And to me, that is the main question of all this. And until proven otherwise, I'll continue to believe that this is going to be about what is the dollar figure, and probably just about that alone. Now, I've heard people make the point, and it's a fair point, that once you get to a certain dollar amount, how much of a difference in Juan Soto's life is it really going to make? Probably not much. I know this sounds crazy, but, is $650 million a whole lot different than $625? Well, it's $25 million.
Taxes will say it will.
I take part of that. You're right. No, you're absolutely right. But in the day-to-day, it probably doesn't make that much of a difference of your day-to-day life. You've got more money than you can count. But the issue, and I do wonder this with Hal Steinbrenner and the Yankees, I do wonder how much, and this goes for every team, how much the Steve Cohen factor just plays in. If the reports that have been circulating that Steve Cohen, any offer Juan Soto would get, Steve Cohen would say, hey, here's $50 million more. Juan, you get $650, well, here's $700. You get $700, here's $750. I have no idea to what length Steve Cohen is willing to go. But if that is true, then yes, if I'm Hal Steinbrenner, or if I'm any other owner or GM that wants Juan Soto to play for my baseball team, I'm concerned.
I've said it from the very beginning. If you go back and if you listen to Soto's answers in spring training, that it sounded like a guy who said, listen, this is a 1-year loan. I'm not staying here.
Yeah.
I'm here this year because I have to be. After that, I'm out. And I think that Steinbrenner may have heard that or something similar during their meeting, because Steinbrenner went on later to say something along the lines of, we're going to be in on everyone. We have the ability to sign whoever we want. And that to me sounds like that was half the quote. The rest of the quote was, when Soto leaves.
Now, somebody in the chat brought up a good point, and we can continue this discussion into our next hour. Look, I think it's easy to believe the idea that Steve Cohen will just pay whatever because he can. And that might be true. Very well may be true, because he wants Juan Soto. He understands. So it's really a once in an ownership potentially opportunity to get a player of this caliber at this age who can make that kind of impact for as many years as he'll be in his prime. But somebody in the chat points out, and I think it's a really good point, what if it's not true? What if, let's say it's not $50 million per se, but what if there is a limit to Steve Cohen's pockets? Could it be something where Scott Boras doesn't mind that getting out, because guess what? The Yankees and any other team, well, they got to keep offering more.
That's the game.
And offering more. That is the game. So it is going to ultimately be fascinating to see, A, where Juan Soto goes, and B, what the dollar amount actually is. And is that the New York Mets, or is it not? Because to be honest with you, if Steve Cohen is willing to go $50 million above any other offer, I don't see how in any way, shape, or form Juan Soto is not a New York Met when this is all said and done. But I don't know. Maybe Juan does like the pinstripes. I guess we're going to find out. Hour number 2, your phone calls and more coming up after this on 97.3 The Fan.
It's time for an inside look at what's cooking on the San Diego Padres hot stove as the team gets ready for the 2025 season.
Swing and a miss. Padres win.
Sam Levitt breaks down the Padres offseason moves and provides an in-depth look at everything you need to know before the Padres take the field for spring training.
Swinging a high fly ball. Deep left center. This one way back and gone.
Plus the latest headlines from around Major League Baseball and analysis of what's happening around the big leagues.
Breaking news out of baseball.
Welcome to Inside San Diego Baseball with the Padres Radio Network's pre- and post-game host, Sam Levitt.
Hour number 2 of Inside San Diego Baseball on a Wednesday night here in America's finest city. Sam Levitt with you inside our San Diego studios. Frank Marchese on the quote-unquote other side of the glass doing the producing here tonight, chiming in from time to time. We are with you until 9 p.m., 1 hour remaining to talk all things Padres baseball as the offseason rolls along. I will tell you a little programming note. We will not have a show next week, next Wednesday. I will be already in the midst of my Thanksgiving festivities on the road for Thanksgiving. So no show next week. We will be back with you 2 weeks from today, whatever that date is, 2 weeks from today. And then I actually think the next show we'd have for you would be from the winter meetings. I'm not totally sure what the schedule's going to look like for the winter meetings because I actually know I fly out on Wednesday night.
So you're out of the studio again is what you're telling me.
Yes, I'm going to be out of the studio again in Dallas for the winter meetings. Now, we're going to have great coverage for you here on 97.3 The Fan and on social media for the winter meetings in Dallas, as we've had the last couple of years. I'm not totally sure what we're going to do with the show from 7 to 9 on Wednesday night because I know I'm going to be on a plane. I'm not sure if we're going to move that up to another night or what we're going to do. Myself and Mr. Adam Klug have not really discussed that yet. So we'll see what we...
I'm here.
Well, it may be the Frank Marchese show. We'll see. But anyway, we'll work that out. But again, next week, next Wednesday, no show. Then we'll be back with you 2 weeks from today with a show back here in our San Diego studios. Couple of score updates for you. Before we get to your Padres phone calls at 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. The first period is over between the San Diego Gulls and the Calgary Wranglers. Gulls leading 3-2 at the end of the first period. So a high-scoring affair there. Is that at Pechanga Arena?
It is.
Okay, all right. So here in San Diego, have not yet been to a Gulls game in my San Diego tenure.
I went for the opener.
Wow.
And I thought, down 6-1, I think it was.
Okay.
About 5 minutes left in the second period was a nice invitation to leave.
Okay.
They ended up coming back, too. It was 6-5 the final.
Okay, all right. Well, the Gulls winning right now. First intermission, 3-2 over Calgary. Local basketball, UCSD plays LaSalle at 10 a.m. tomorrow. UCSD 2-2 on the year. They will play at 10 a.m. tomorrow, very early start time. That's one of those tournaments in Daytona Beach, Florida, part of the Boardwalk Battle Tournament, UCSD against LaSalle. So a little local college basketball action for you bright and early tomorrow at 10 a.m. You can certainly follow that. Let's hit the phones. Phone number is always 833-288-0973. Again, 833-288-0973. We can talk anything you want regarding the Padres and beyond. Let's begin things here tonight. Let's go to Juan calling in from Vista. Juan, you're on Inside San Diego Baseball. Welcome in.
Hey, how's it going, Sam?
Hey.
I just kind of called in to kind of get your opinion on potentially trading Robert Suarez, considering that this would be the last season he would have before he can opt out. And since he has had a good season, or he had a good season this last season, he could have another one this season and opt out of that contract.
Yeah.
Maybe package him in with someone like Eggy Rosario, someone who needs an infielder, maybe a backup of some kind, and maybe the Padres can take some prospects and flip them for different pieces and more money.
Yeah, Juan, and I know it's something to appreciate the phone call, and it's a really good question, and it's something we have not discussed here on this program, I know Ben and Woods talked about it a couple of weeks ago. It's not the craziest idea in the world, and it may sound a little crazy just when you say it initially, because Robert Suarez was an all-star last year, is your closer, is presumably your closer for 2025. But when you are up against the CBT number and you do have as many needs as the Padres have, and you also have a very, very strong bullpen, it would not be, let's say, unwise for the Padres to explore trading from a quote-unquote position of strength and seeing what kind of value Robert Suarez has out there, somebody who's going to make $10 million next year. Not that that's a ton for the quality of a closer like Robert Suarez, but when, again, you're up against that CBT number, well, hey, $10 million is a lot of money to potentially free up. So I don't know if I'm at the point yet where I'm going to sit here and say the Padres should trade Robert Suarez and try to A, free up money, and B, fill other needs through whatever money you free up and whatever you get back for Robert Suarez. But would it be crazy to think that when Suarez could potentially opt out after this coming season, would it be crazy to think, well, we're trading from a position of strength and maybe we could make our team even better by doing that? I would not be surprised if it's an idea that has crossed A.J. Preller's mind, or if he's already had conversations about what the value of somebody like Robert Suarez is. We know that A.J. gets very creative. We know he often does things that you don't see coming. It would also mean that you're trading away your all-star closer. And I know Robert had his struggles in the second half. I know it was up and down, but the reality is, for most of the season, he was an incredibly important part of what the Padres did. And I'm pretty confident in saying that he's going to be good next year. And it would create, just by his absence, a big hole in the Padres bullpen. But because of the salary, because of his ability to opt out next year potentially, because of the Padres' needs, because of where their salary is, it is not the craziest idea in the world, and for the right trade, you could sell me on it. I don't know that I expect it, but if it's, again, I would not be shocked if it is something that is being discussed at some level, at least seeing what the value of Robert is for all those reasons.
My thought would be that unless you think Jason Adam is going to be the guy,
could be.
That's a move that I would wait to make until the trade deadline or getting close to it. Unless you think Adam's going to be the guy, then do it now.
Well, I think the hard part about that, the only scenario where I see Robert Suarez getting traded at the deadline would be if the Padres aren't good.
Out of it, yeah.
And they're bad. I cannot see any scenario where they would be in it and then trade their closer. That wouldn't make sense. But if it didn't go well, and hopefully they're not in that scenario, then yeah, I mean, you may look at it, and if he's doing well and you know he's going to opt out, yeah, you trade him. It's an interesting question. I think Ben brought it up on Ben and Woods, and it was the first time anybody had really, I think, talked about it on the station, unless somebody else had. I don't think they had. And it was really interesting to think about because he is somebody who has a ton of value, who makes decent money. It's a position of strength where the Padres do have I think right now, very solid bullpen, a bullpen you should be confident, not that it's a finished product, but it would be interesting to see what you could get and how you could potentially get even better by moving a piece like that. And again, the opt-out part of it is important to note because if Robert has a really good season, he almost undoubtedly will opt out at the end of the year. It's a very interesting question, and I don't know that it's something that's on a lot of people's radars, but if you're going to look up and down this roster and say, well, who would make sense to trade? I think Robert would be pretty high on that list if you were going to trade somebody and try to improve your team, free up money that way. Now, of course, you have other guys that are potentially free agents at the end of the year. Michael King, Dylan Cease, Luis Ariz. Would it shock me at some point this offseason if we heard something about rumors about an Arise or a cease? It would not, because again, while it will create a hole, they're important players. Reality is that they're free agents at the end of the year. Padres have needs. Frees up payroll when you're talking about those two guys, and A.J. Preller may have to get a little creative, and that's the reality. He may have to get a little creative, even if it's something you don't necessarily see coming. It's a really good call and a really good question. I don't think it's going to happen. I'd still be surprised, but it's an interesting thought. And it's an interesting thing to think about.
The idea is there.
The idea is not crazy. Let's go to Steve calling in from Fallbrook. Steve, you're on 97.3 The Fan. Go ahead.
Good evening, guys. Hey, Sammy, first of all, I want to say that you, in November, are relevant with baseball. And ever since I've been a long-time San Diego sports radio listener, and I sure enjoy you. And Frank, I appreciate your East Coast insight as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Steve.
Anyhow, as far as the Juan Soto thing, Juan was great on the team. I wasn't terribly disappointed to see him go. I think the chemistry of the team was much better this year. I have no idea if that has anything to do with his departure or whatever. But as far as, a young athlete like Juan Soto, when you're talking, $600 and $700 million, that extra $50 million, I don't think his financial guy, Scott Boras, is going to want to let go of that $50 million.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that he might play Juan into, sticking to his guns and getting the money.
Yeah, look, Steve, and appreciate the phone call. Thank you for the kind words as well. I think that part is clear, and it seems to be the consensus among a lot of these national writers that Juan's going to go to the place that pays him the most money. Now, is that for sure? I don't know. I mean, I don't know the mind of Juan Soto. We do know with Scott Boras that tends to be the case. I mean, I highly doubt Scott is going to steer him in the direction of the offer that is not the most. That's just fact. It's been the belief of a lot of people that Juan will go to the highest bidder. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. He's got every right to go to the highest bidder. Is there a chance he may look at a $670 million offer and a $660 million offer and say, I want to go to the Yankees instead of the Mets? I guess it's possible. But it's been the belief of seemingly a lot of people that he will go to the highest bidder. He's got an agent that typically brings his clients to the highest bidder. And again, with Soto, the question I think right now, the most important question is the Mets part of it. To me, that is the absolute biggest question domino of this whole thing. If the $50 million rumor is true, the idea that Steve Cohen, whatever offer Soto gets, is just going to add $50 million on top of it. If that is true, then I have a really hard time believing he's not going to be a New York Met. I just do, because I don't see a scenario where Juan gets to stay in New York, play in a big market, play for a team that I think it's pretty fair to say is on the up and up in the Mets, and go to the highest bidder, stay on the East Coast, which is something that, he's enjoyed being on the East Coast. We know that. I don't see a scenario where he's going to get $50 million put in front of him above any other offer. Let's even say it's $25 million. Let's cut it in half. Where Boras and Soto are going to look at it and say, we're not going to the Mets. I just, again, that could be a bluff. Who knows if that's actually real? Maybe there's a team that goes crazy. Guess what? This time last year, all the projections for Shohei Ohtani, and correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, I don't recall. Now, people thought he was going to make a lot. I don't think they were saying $700 million. I mean, let's remember, when that number came out, we were stunned.
Yeah.
We were like, 700? I mean, there was a point with Ohtani where I think people were talking about like 5 to 6 and being like, people, there were a lot of people saying, no way, 5 to 6. He ended up getting 700. Now, it got interesting with the deferrals and how they ultimately structured the contract. But, what I would say about this stuff when it comes to a guy the caliber of Juan Soto, and you're dealing with an agent like Scott Boras, and you've got an owner like Steve Cohen in the mix, and you've got the Yankees in the mix, and you've got the Dodgers in the mix, who the heck knows? Who knows? I don't know how high it's going to go. Maybe this gets really crazy to a level where we say, oh my goodness, I can't believe he got whatever number. I don't know.
I don't think it's going to get to Shohei Ohtani level.
I certainly hope it doesn't.
Because at least in Ohtani's case, you're paying for a hitter and a pitcher.
And an international superstar.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I don't think it's going to get to or beyond 700. But from what I've read about what's going on around baseball, from the baseball people right now, we may not have to wait too long for an answer, because it's rumored that he is going to sign before the winter meetings, which is a couple weeks away. So
yeah, I'd like it, because I think it'd be kind of cool if that whole thing is wrapped up by the time we get to the meetings, or else it becomes the story of the meetings.
It's a circus.
Much like last year, it was all Ohtani. If you remember the winter meetings last year, like nothing happened until Soto got traded on, I think it was the Wednesday night.
Yeah.
So I kind of hope Soto signs earlier so we have some more stuff going on at the meetings, because typically what happens is
where are the meetings this year?
Dallas.
Somebody in the chat. Okay.
Dallas. Typically when there's that one or two looming big time players, it kind of slows up the rest of the market. So we'll see. Remember, all the other teams, if you're, let's say, the Yankees, well, you're waiting to see if you get Soto or not. You really can't do anything else until you understand what's happening with Soto. So it tends to slow down everything else. So we'll see. If that $50 million rumor is true from the Mets and Steve Cohen, I don't see how he's not going to be a Met. I don't get it, because then it just makes too much sense. Why wouldn't he go there? Stays in New York.
I wouldn't do the 50. I would say, let's just say the Yankees offer $550.
I don't think that's getting it done.
No, I'm just saying, if I were Cohen, I would say, all right, how much more do you want? Are you okay with $575? Are you okay with $570? I'm not going to pay you $600 million just for the sake of it.
Yeah, I guess.
That would be the way I would play it if I were Cohen.
Man, it's a lot of money for one player.
Yeah. Yeah, it almost makes you think we got into the right profession, just at the wrong part of it.
For a guy who's not a great defender, he's a base runner.
He's a liability on defense, is what he is.
A lot of money, but he is a great hitter, and he is really young. I going to get him for a long time in his prime.
I feel as though if he does go to the Mets, especially with the trade that they made yesterday, getting Jose Siri, he is going to be a $600 million DH. Because they still have Starling Marte under contract for next year.
Yeah, I don't know if he's a DH right. Well, yeah, we'll see. But going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. The Blue Jays, I think, are a really interesting team for them as well, because they've got a lot of money. They're a team that, to me, could really, if they wanted to get crazy and go toe for toe with the Mets, with the Steve Cohen, really can. Be clear, the Yankees can too, but they have not typically, with Hal Steinbrenner, shown that appetite to do that. So that's where it's going to get fascinating. And keep in mind, that is just in a New York sense. It's a really interesting part of this whole thing. If the Yankees lose a guy they had to the Mets just because of money. Now, Steve Cohen is, one of a kind as far as being by far and away the richest owner in the sport. Great. But man, if you're a Yankee fan, you're sitting there saying, forgetting the ownership part of it, how does that happen? We're going to see. And you know what? Maybe he goes to neither, and it's a Red Sox or a Dodgers. I don't know.
Keep this one in mind when it comes to Roki Sasaki as well. Sometimes little brother does win.
Yeah, well, we'll see. All right, we'll step aside. When we come back, more of your phone calls, 833-288-0973. I do want to get to the Rule 5 protections at some point before we're out of here at 9 p.m. And I also want to get to some of the other Major League headlines. We'll get to those. We'll take your phone calls. You're listening to Inside San Diego Baseball on a Wednesday night up until 9 p.m. on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Little Spice Girls on a Wednesday night here on 97.3 The Fan. Sam Levitt with you. It's Inside San Diego Baseball, our once-a-week show on Wednesday night, 7 to 9 p.m. as we talk all things San Diego Padres baseball. Sam Levitt with you inside our San Diego studios, taking you up until 9 p.m. We will touch on the Padres' Rule 5 protections, who they added to the 40-man roster yesterday, because I do think it's actually interesting and also may tell us a little something about what the Padres are valuing right now, what they need right now. Not that it's going to be a huge surprise. So we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Let's continue on the phones. 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973, the phone number. Let's go down to Chula Vista. It's John. John, you're on Inside San Diego Baseball. Go ahead.
Hey, Sammy.
Hey.
How you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, my friend. Doing fantastic. All right, I got a couple of quick ones here. All right, with Merrill, yeah, I think you are correct on that one as far as the East Coast biased. Do you believe that one? For sure. For sure. Merrill should have got that. The other one is with Juan Soto.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is what's killing me. You know, you're going to pay the man, like you're saying, $650-700 million. Holy scamoles. What that does is that actually, you know, you pay a man that amount of money, or any of these players that amount of money, that just raises the prices at the gate, which are getting super high to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and it's hard to take your family to a ball game when the team is trying to make up the prices for that. And these guys are just playing a sport. You know, they're playing a sport every day, and that's what they do.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what I got.
All right, John. Well, appreciate the phone call. Look, I mean,
It's not wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, these guys make a lot of money. It's more money than most of us, unless you do something. I mean, you're like, I don't know. I don't know who out there listening would know what it feels like to have $600-700 million in the bank. But look, to John's point, yeah, guys make a lot of money. Things are expensive, and you're right. Teams got to find ways to pay players the salaries they make. Teams spend a lot of money. Players make a lot of money. That's the way it is. But that's across all sports and all teams. I mean, look at NBA contracts. You know, NFL's a little bit different with the guaranteed money. You know, on the whole, I don't think NFL players make nearly what an NBA player and even in some cases MLB players make, although there are plenty of NFL guys that make massive amounts of money, but that's the way it is right now in sports. So look, yes, you know, like we said kind of jokingly earlier, will it really make any difference in Juan Soto's life whether he makes $625 million or 50 million? I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference in his day-to-day life, but it's only the difference of $20 million. So obviously it's a lot of money. So look, it's how it goes right now. Guys make a lot of money, and I think out of our control. So just try to enjoy the product and enjoy the great athletes on the field. All right, we'll get to more of your phone calls, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973, phone number to call if you want to get involved. Let's talk about the Rule 5 protections. The Padres, let me rephrase this quickly. The Padres selected 3 minor leaguers onto their 40-man roster yesterday. And what that does is it protects those 3 players from being selections by other teams in the Rule 5 draft at the winter meetings in a few weeks. A good example of a Rule 5 selection is actually Stephen Kolek, a name that a lot of Padres fans know from a year ago. Padres selected Kolek in last year's Rule 5 draft, and Kolek actually, before he got injured, was on the Major League roster the whole year, and he needed to be on the Major League roster the whole year in order for the Padres to keep him and not have to return him to the team they selected him from. So the Padres had a decision to make as to who to quote-unquote protect from the Rule 5 draft and add to the 40-man roster, and who they will leave open to being selected in the Rule 5 draft. So who did the Padres protect from the Rule 5? Who did they add to their roster? The names are Henry Baez, Ryan Berger, who was at spring training last year, and Omar Cruz, all pitchers. And the interesting part about all 3 of these guys is they are pitchers that obviously were at higher levels of the minor leagues, either AA or AAA, but also had success. And also you could envision if the Padres needed to dip pretty deep into their starting pitching depth at some point in 2025, right now, before they add anybody, before they make any trades, these would be some of the guys they may be dipping down to. All had good years. Henry Baez, a 2.99 ERA between high A in Double-A last year in 26 starts. Ryan Bergert, 23 starts at Double-A San Antonio, 4.78 ERA, just pitched in the Arizona Fall League. Numbers weren't great, but had a good year for the most part at Double-A. Left-hander Omar Cruz started the year as a reliever, then he began starting games during the summer through 5 or more innings a few times with El Paso in July and August, the 3.96 ERA in 86 innings between double and Triple-A. So again, the three guys, Cruz, Berger, and Baez, all similar in the sense that they are, and Cruz a little bit different because he was a reliever for the most part, but then again started games during the summer with El Paso. But all three guys are upper-level minor league guys who are essentially starting pitchers. And you look at the Padres roster, again, before they make a single move this offseason, and that's a part of their team is currently constructed, a part of their organization is currently constructed where they have a need. Because right now they've got 2 open spots in their rotation that we don't know how they're going to get filled right now. Well, your options are guys like Matt Waldron, guys like Randy Vasquez, guys like Johnny Brito. So right now on this roster, starting pitching depth, and a lot of it, that's a need. It's a clear need right now before the Padres make a single move, before the Padres hear from Roki Sasaki, before all of that. So am I surprised that the three guys they elected to protect all could project as starting pitchers that provide depth at the major league level? I'm not surprised at all. It's an area of need. Padres don't have a ton of it at the upper levels of the minor leagues. So the fact that they selected three guys to protect that potentially give them at least fresh arms that they could go to at Double or Triple-A throughout the course of the season, it makes a lot of sense that those were the three guys they protected. Now, who didn't they protect of their top 30 prospects? This is according to MLB.com. Left-hander Jagger Haynes, who is talented, but hasn't even reached Double-A yet. He's not protected, but again, makes sense because he's not somebody that would be readily available for this season in all likelihood if you needed to go to him. Left-hander Javian Sandridge, who was actually really good during spring training last year and was pretty interesting as far as a prospect, and somebody I thought that might get called up at some point during the season when the Padres needed relief help. They ultimately didn't really get that, that down on the depth chart, the Sandridge. But 52 appearances this season between Double and Triple-A, all out of the bullpen. Again, we talked about the Padres' strength in their bullpen. They may look at Sandridge and say, you know what? We've got a good bullpen. We've got other guys that are ahead of him as far as guys that we would call up that are already on the 40-man. We can afford to lose Sandridge if he gets selected by another team. And then another interesting guy that was not protected in the top 30 was Brandon Valenzuela, the number 12 catcher, or I should say the number 12 prospect in the Padres system. Really a defense-first catcher, was at Double-A and Triple-A last year. And again, you look at Valenzuela, you think to yourself, okay, well, you're pretty sure the Padres are going to add a catcher, whether it's Kyle Higashioka or somebody else, right, to be at least a guy who's platooning with Luis Campusano, if not starting over Luis Campusano. Campusano is probably, if he's not on the major league roster at the start of the year, the first guy up from Triple-A. You've got Ethan Salas on the way. Valenzuela is a guy who the Padres probably feel they can afford to lose, potentially in a Rule 5 draft. So Haynes, Sandridge, and Valenzuela, the top 30 prospects, according to MLB.com, the Padres didn't protect. So again, in the grand scheme of things, is this major news? Not really. I mean, look, again, you could see somebody like a Cruz or a Bergert or a Baez up at some point to make a spot start. I would say this, even though these guys are on the 40-man roster, if Henry Baez or Ryan Bergert or Omar Cruz are making a lot of starts for the 2025 Padres, it's probably not a great thing if we're being honest. That's probably not great. That probably means you had injuries. That probably means you had poor performance. Somebody in the chat says Brett Sullivan is still around too. It's a good point, right? You have Brett Sullivan in your system. So again, part of the reason you might be willing to lose Valenzuela as a Rule 5 selection from another team. So it's not the biggest of news, but it does show you a little bit about what the Padres need, and that is starting pitching depth, because once you get beyond Waldron and Vasquez and Brito, and there are a couple of other names you could sprinkle in there that, are at AA and AAA, these are right here, right now, before the Padres do a thing with their roster, and they're going to be more names. They're going to sign some starting pitchers, I'm sure of it. But these are the guys that potentially you are dipping down into your minor league system to come up when you need them to. Hopefully it's not the case, because that means things didn't go very well in your rotation for one reason or another. But the Padres, I would say unsurprisingly, protected and added 3 pitchers to their 40-man that could potentially make a spot start if you needed them to.
Now, I just want to say, because I'm not as well-versed in the Padres minor league system as I probably should be, but yeah. I just want to make clear, just because the players that were not added to the 40-man roster weren't
doesn't mean
added,
they're going to get picked.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that they're gone. It doesn't mean that they have to be drafted.
Yeah.
It's just that they do not have that protected status to where they can't be touched.
Correct.
In the Rule 5
Correct.
draft.
In fact, there's a good chance they're not going to be selected. That's the reality. There's
a lot of teams do pass on the Rule 5 draft because they don't want to keep a guess on their roster all season long.
Absolutely. There is a very significant chance that, and again, I just picked those 3 guys to pick because they were in the top 30 prospect list, but there's a very good chance that Javian Sandridge, Brandon Valenzuela, and who else did I say? Jagger Haynes. Very, very good chance that those 3 guys are part of the Padres system come post-winter meetings. Very good chance. Doesn't mean they're going to get selected. It's not the biggest news in the world. If they don't, if they do, we'll probably make a note of it. But just interesting to think about. Look, the reality is this, is that when the Padres traded away the number of minor leaguers they did, all that depth in the Scott trade, the Adam trade, the Cease trade, the Arise trade. And this is something we talked about last week when we had the conversation about Ethan Salas. Is he untouchable? Is he not? The reality is it feels like a fairly thin system right now. I'm not saying it can't be rebuilt, but a fairly thin system after the top 2 guys in Salas and DeVries, and really in particular, there's just not a ton that's immediately major league ready. And I don't even say that as a criticism. It's the reality of when you make the number of trades the Padres did and you give up the number of prospects they did. Now, like we alluded to last week, they've got a GM in AJ Preller who has proven time and time again that he can rebuild the system as far as talent and also reputation. And the reputation part of it's important because it helps you make the trades that he's made. So hopefully he can do that again quickly, but there's not a ton of help at the very upper levels of the minor leagues. So why do I point this stuff out? Because, hey, when you need a spot start, guess what? At a certain time of year, depending on who's here, who's not, injuries, all that.
Comes Jackson Wolf.
You could see Henry Baez. Welcome Henry Baez for 5 starts. Just worth noting who these guys are. So there's not a ton above them.
And that's another reason why Jackson Merrill missing out on Rookie of the Year is very frustrating, because
he would've had another pick.
Yep, there goes another first-round pick.
Would have had another pick. You're absolutely right. No, it's significant. It's absolutely significant. And, I'm just quickly looking at the 40-man right now, and I didn't look at the full thing before even having this discussion. Outside, I'm going to read, and then we'll go to break here, but I'm going to read you the rest of the pitchers on the 40-man right now, because you're going to say to yourself, well, who else would make a spot start other than the 3 guys we just mentioned?
Well, it's going to be Vasquez and Waldron. Whoever doesn't make the rotation is going to be the first one up.
Absolutely. But here are the other names, just quickly. And this is not including Baez, Bergert, and who else did I say? And Cruz. Adam, he's not making a start.
No.
Brito could make a start.
Yes.
So that's one. Cease, Cosgrove, Darvish, Estrada, Gillespie, Hoeing, Jacob, King, Holick, Matsui, Morahone. Musgrove is hurt. Patino. I'm not sure what Patino's status is. Peralta.
I think he was moved.
Did he get hurt?
Yeah, he was on the 60 man
it's
all year
escaping my
last year.
brain. Yeah. Peralta, Reynolds, Suarez, Vasquez, Waldron. So again, yes, Vasquez, Waldron, Brito are
those
probably
are
the
your
top three
guys.
on the depth chart. Okay, no doubt. But after those three, you're on the 40 man right now. You're looking at Bergert, Baez, and Cruz.
Bullpen day, baby. Let's go.
I mean, look, again, you get that far down into your 40 man, it's probably not great. We shall see. Look, there is a chance that Randy Vasquez and Matt Waldron, there's a chance that Randy Vasquez and Matt Waldron and Johnny Brito all are at AAA to start the year. Padres go get 2 more starters. You know, there's 3 guys right there outside of your opening day starting 5.
There's also a chance
that they're both in the rotation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I doubt that. I really do.
I do too.
I can't see that.
I would say one of them at least would be in the rotation.
Yeah, I can't see that. Could one make it? Sure. Could they be battling for that 5th spot in spring training? Yeah. Could they bring in some other names to battle with them? Sure. It's a good question. All right, let's step aside. When we come back, let's go through some other Major League headlines, the Hall of Fame ballot. We haven't done that as well, so we will wrap up with that final segment inside San Diego baseball, taking you up until 9 p.m. right here on 97.3 The Fan. Our final segment of Inside San Diego Baseball on this Friday. It's not Friday. Why did I say Friday?
We're starting this again?
It's Wednesday. On this Wednesday night. It
worst-
is a Wednesday night, everybody.
The worst part was during pre and post game when I couldn't get on air and make fun of you for saying it was pregame during post game.
I did. The weird part about that is it happened over the course of like 2 weeks where I did it like 3 times after I hadn't done it for 2.5 years. Oh my goodness.
And I was there every time.
Oh my goodness. Friday night. I wish it was Friday. Anyway, it is a Wednesday night here on 97.3 The Fan. We're taking you up until 9 p.m. We've got about 10, 12 more minutes left on Inside San Diego Baseball, our once-a-week program where we talk all things Padres baseball as the offseason rolls along. Sam Levitt with you inside our San Diego studios. Frank Marchese on the producers board chiming in from time to time as well. All right, let's get to a couple of items here in our final segment. Some quick hitters as far as the latest free agency moves and trade rumors. Again, there's not a ton going on. Obviously, we talked plenty about the Juan Soto rumors and everything going on with that. That's the biggest thing going on right now that we continue to keep an eye on. The Mets did make an interesting move earlier. Was that today? That was yesterday. Yesterday. They traded right-handed pitcher Eric Orzi to the Tampa Bay Rays in exchange for Jose Siri, who has power, does not hit for a very high average at all, is a good defender, could be the Mets starting center fielder on opening day. Interesting for the Mets. Again, not a great hitter, does have power, does play good defense. They had pretty much a platoon in center field this year. Tyrone Taylor, Harrison Bader, maybe that's their approach for center field without an immediate solution unless they go sign some sort of free agent. So interesting move there. Jose Siri to the Mets from Tampa Bay.
I think it could be as we talked about plenty last 2 weeks ago, stopgap to Drew Gilbert possibly, because he shouldn't be too far away. But as far as Siri for the Mets, it's basically a 1-to-1 replacement for Harrison Bader, just a little bit better defense.
Yeah, and maybe a little bit more power. So that is the deal there with the Mets trading for Jose Siri. The Rockies and Jacob Stallings agree on a 1-year, $2 million deal with a mutual option for 2026. So Jacob Stallings in Colorado with the Rockies. The Cubs traded for Cleveland Guardians right-handed reliever Eli Morgan. This was a pretty interesting trade because Morgan was very good last year. A 1.93 ERA, 32 appearances, 9 starts, 42 innings, struck out 34. So Eli Morgan again traded to the Cubs in exchange for outfielder Alfonso Rosario, the Cubs' number 21 prospect, according to MLB.com. So that was a trade a little bit earlier today. We talked about Juan Soto. Plenty interesting here. Former Padre Nick Martinez was the only guy in baseball to accept a qualifying offer. Now, that's good for Nick because it's a 1-year, $21 million deal. Good for Nick Martinez. That's a lot of money for Nick to make in 1 year. So he will go back to Cincinnati on the qualifying offer for $21 million.
I think they're averaging 1 qualifying acceptance a year over the last 12 years. I think it's been 12 acceptances.
That's a nice deal for Nick Martinez.
Definitely.
And really is.
Going back to the Cubs, they've also traded for Matt Thaiss today.
Okay.
Catcher from Anaheim.
Okay, very good. Angels reportedly in on 35-year-old starting pitcher Tomoyuki Sugano. 35-year-old pitcher from Japan that reportedly is going to come over to the United States. So the Angels apparently interested in him. What is with this offseason so far? The Angels are the most active team so far. Red Sox and Orioles reportedly in talks with Max Fried. Red Sox also in talks with Blake Snell. Braves showing interest in Walker Buehler. Some various rumors around free agency. So that's a look at the latest trades and free agent rumors. Again, nothing super, super major that's actually happened there, but the latest on all of that, beyond obviously Juan Soto being the headline story right now as the meetings with Juan continue. All right, before we go here, the Hall of Fame ballot for 2025 is out, and there are 14 newcomers on the Hall of Fame ballot, including two guys that I think are definitely going to be first ballot Hall of Famers, and Ichiro Suzuki, who should be unanimous, and CC Sabathia, who I think is no doubt a first ballot Hall of Famer. So the rest of the newcomers, before we get to the returning guys on the ballot, and including one guy who's on his last year of the ballot who's really close, the new guys on the ballot, first year Hall of Fame ballots for Ichiro, who should be an absolute unanimous pick.
100%.
CC Sabathia, who should be pretty close to a unanimous pick to me. I mean, he's a sure Hall of Famer, first ballot in my eyes. Dustin Pedroia, interesting. I don't think he's going to make it. Very good player. Had he played a little bit longer, maybe would have had a bit more of an argument. Ian Kinsler, Felix Hernandez, not going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I will be interested to see if King Felix has a case as time goes on. Troy Tulowitzki, Ben Zobrist, Curtis Granderson, Hanley Ramirez, exceptionally talented, but never really got the big time numbers at the end of his career. Russell Martin, Adam Jones, friend of the station, Brian McCann, Carlos Gonzalez, and Fernando Rodney, the 14 newcomers. So out of those, the two that I would think make it are Ichiro, and Ichiro for sure. I think CC Sabathia should make it first ballot. I think he will.
I agree.
I'd be surprised if CC's not first ballot.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we could sit here and say, oh, this guy should and shouldn't be in. Meanwhile, nobody thought Mike Mussina was going to be a Hall of Famer, and he got in, first, second try?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, CC, 251 wins, was outstanding for a long time. Pitched a long time. I think CC is going to be first ballot. Would I be shocked if he's not first ballot? No, but I think he will. The returning guys that are really interesting. Billy Wagner will be in his 10th and final year on the ballot. He was at 73.8%. You have to get to 75% of the vote. So he needs a handful more votes to get to 75%. I would think his final year, he's so close that there will be a number of writers that have not voted him in before that will vote him in. I'd be pretty surprised if at 73.8 in his final year, and it's been trending that way for Billy Wagner, if he does not get in. I would think he gets in.
Watch him get 74.9.
I'll feel bad because I think he deserves to get in. And
I mean, he will have another chance as far as like older returning players, but he will. It's not going to be his last ever chance.
No, but you want to get in this way.
He should get in now.
I would think that's close to the point where I would think you get in on your final year. I would think there are going to be voters that get him in. Andrew Jones is getting interesting. He's going to be in his 8th year on the ballot. He's currently at 61.6%. It's ground to make up. That will be it'll be interesting to see how much he gains and then sets him up for the final 2 years on the ballot because he's pretty close. I mean, 61.6%.
I would say no.
Carlos Beltran, I think the player is a Hall of Famer. He's at 57.1%. It's only his 3rd year on the ballot. The question with Carlos is going to be how much the Astros stuff gets held against him. I don't know the answer to that. That would seemingly be hard, I think, for a lot of voters to flip on.
It'd be harsh, honestly. It would be really harsh.
Yeah, I think a lot of voters are going to hold it against him, though. So here's the thing, though. He's at 57.1. It's only his 3rd year, so he's got a lot of time for that stuff to soften, and it can soften.
I mean, wouldn't you think he's paid his dues from that? I mean, he got fired.
Lost the Mets job.
He got fired before he managed a game.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, look, I don't know. That's an interesting one because I think the player is.
Absolutely.
A-Rod, 4th year on the ballot. He's only at 34.8%. I don't see him making up that.
Honestly, at this point, and I've said the same thing, I've heard many other people say the same thing. Once you let one steroid user in, Pudge Rodriguez, let them all in.
Well,
you cannot use steroids as a reason why guys aren't in.
So that's a totally separate conversation.
I
We'll
agree.
have a different day. But just A-Rod, he's at 35% essentially. That's a ton of ground to make up. Again, only 4th year. Manny Ramirez, 9th year on the ballot at 32.5. He's not going to get in. Chase Utley, 2nd year on the ballot, 28.8. Then you got Omar Vizquel, Bobby Abreu, Jimmy Rollins, Andy Pettit, Mark Burley, Francisco Rodriguez, Torrey Hunter, David Wright, all varying years on the ballot, all sitting below 30%. Probably all not going to get in. Really, really, really good players, but this is not the hall of very good, or at least it's not supposed to be.
Are you getting the same feeling that I'm getting now seeing players on the Hall of Fame ballot that we grew up watching?
Yeah, it's weird.
That's all.
We're getting older.
Yeah, it is.
So that's the Hall of Fame ballot. Grand total of 28. Again, the 14 newcomers. I would think at bare minimum we have 3 that get in this year. That would be, in my mind, Ichiro, CC, and Billy Wagner.
I would agree.
Could we have more? Maybe. That's it for this week's edition of Inside San Diego Baseball. Again, no show next week. Happy Thanksgiving. We will talk to you 2 weeks from tonight at 7 p.m. Ben and Woods return to the air at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Plenty more to come from them. I'll talk to you in a couple of weeks on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan.